This is others. My view of life is to be very positive about everything, and anybody and everybody, makes mistakes, right? Just ignore the mistakes and then move on. This is something that I firmly believe in. I don't think anybody in this world agrees with me on this. Nobody agrees with me in this on this because they don't want to not punish. They don't want to not punish people who have done mistakes, and they think that is my greatest weakness.
Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of ContraMinds. In today's episode, we are in conversation with Professor Yadati Narahari of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Professor Narahari's research work focuses on game theory, mechanism design, and artificial intelligence techniques to research problems at the intersection of computer science and economics. He has a long history with the IISc, where he has earned his bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. Since 1988, he has been on the faculty of the IISc and has held numerous leadership positions within the institute, most notably serving as Dean the Division of Electrical, Electronics and Computer Sciences from 2014 to 2021. We had a wide-ranging discussion with Professor Narahari. We spoke about the work and influence of John von Neumann, the convergence of AI, economics and game theory, and the principles that form the foundation of a good incentive. If you enjoy the work we do at ContraMinds, give us a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also send us what you think via Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at ContraMinds. So without further ado, here is our conversation with Professor Yadati Narahari. So, hello everyone. Greetings of the day wherever you are. In today's episode, we have with us Professor Narahari from the Indian Institute of Science. His research is focused on a very interesting intersection of AI, game theory, and mechanism design. And thank you so much, Professor, for taking the time and being with us today on ContraMinds.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think it's an excellent opportunity for me to reach out.
The pleasure is entirely ours, Professor. Professor, let's kick things off, and I want to start off with a question that I really want to know what your thoughts are, which is when preparing for this interview, we heard you speak about this particular person, and we want our listeners to share in the excitement and the legacy that this person has left behind. So my question to you is, who is John von Neumann, and why do we owe him a great deal of debt as a modern society?
Okay, I think this is a great question to start with. So, John von Neumann is easily my biggest hero. He has done several wonderful things, and a number of visionary things he has done right from the 1920s. The most prominent that I would like to mention is that from 1928 to 1944, there was this beautiful partnership between a computer scientist. Of course, he was also a mathematician and physician, von Neumann, and also a celebrated economist of those times, Oscar Morgenstern. So this was a fantastic collaboration for 16 years at the Center for Advanced Study at Princeton. And during this time, I think they came up with a huge, big tome called "The Theory of Games and Economic Behavior." It's almost like 1,000-page book, which lays all the foundations of game theory. Even to this day, if you want to recapture all the important, significant results of those times, this is the source which contains the most authentic version of all those results. And during this time, they also completely settled the issue of existence of equilibria, or the so-called saddle points, for two-player zero-sum games, the so-called matrix games. These are games where there are two players, call them one and two, and whenever for every strategy profile, whenever player one gets, let's say, a real number x as the utility, the player two will get minus x. So it's called a strictly competitive game, or a two-player zero-sum games. It was not known whether such games will have an equilibrium, because there are many of those games where if you are playing a pure strategy, then you can actually show that equilibria don't exist. But what von Neumann and Morgenstern were able to show, and that was a big step forward for game theory, that every two-player zero-sum game will have what is called as a randomized saddle point. It will have an equilibrium in what are called mixed strategies, which are like probabilistic strategies. Uh, of course, this result was taken to the next level by John Nash in 1950, when he showed that every finite strategic form game will have an equilibrium. In fact, the equilibrium there is so-called mixed strategy Nash equilibrium. So that issue was settled by John Nash for multiplayer games, but it was settled for two-player zero-sum games by von Neumann and Morgenstern. This is only one of the many results that they developed. So there is a string of very significant results that they have captured in their book. And astonishingly, I think in the 1930s, von Neumann also was working on uh, you know his model of computing. So there is a von Neumann model of computing, which we study in every textbook on computer science. And von Neumann is the inventor of that. And he's also credited with um, talking about the notion of an algorithm and the complexity of an algorithm. So, in other words, in the 1930s, here is a visionary who was laying the foundations of computer science, and at the same time, he was also laying the foundations of game theory. And so, there were two intellectual currents that this person had initiated during the 20s and 30s. And, something like 60 years later, there was a complete convergence of these two intellectual disciplines into what is now called as algorithmic game theory. It's a beautiful interface area between computer science and microeconomics. So now you can imagine how visionary von Neumann should have been in order to think about two disciplines which actually converged together after 60 years. And ever since the late 1990s, when this happened, I think every leading computer science department in the world now has a group working on algorithmic aspects of game theory. And game theory itself has come to play a very important role in many high impact applications. Um, and now, another thing that I would like to mention here is that game theory now can be considered as an essential tool in the modern toolkit that people talk about. Now, everybody talks about machine learning, deep learning, and the toolkit that is required for us to do things, right? And game theory is also a part of that toolkit. So, just as we have linear programming as a toolkit, game theory is also like a part of a toolkit. So, I think all the wonderful contributions made by people starting with von Neumann have ensured that game theory is now an integral part of the mathematical toolkit that everybody should be equipped with.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about this convergence of AI and of computer science and game theory? Because on the onset, like you said, that Yes, there was an intuitive connection between those two. But can you talk a little bit about how that connection has been broadened and deepened and expanded in today's world where data has become very cheap and developing algorithms has grown by leaps and bounds? So can you talk a little bit about that convergence as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think economists always were concerned with the existence of certain desirable states for any system, any economic system. Games are an excellent model for modeling the dynamics of all economic systems. And the desirable points of these economic systems are called as equilibria. And economics has always been concerned with, whether these equilibria exist. And they were not really concerned about how to compute those equilibria. So I think computer scientists, and then the algorithms and complexity community, they're always worried about can we design an algorithm for a given problem, right? And then if we are able to design an algorithm, then what is the computational complexity of that algorithm? So this is the this is these are the fundamental questions that theoretical computer scientists always ask from the late 1960s. So naturally, I think one question that was asked is, well, Nash equilibrium is such an important concept, and as you know, Professor John Nash got the Nobel Prize in 1994. And suddenly, I think the notion of Nash equilibrium caught the attention of many people, including theoretical computer scientists. So now they knew that the existence of Nash equilibria has been settled. So they wanted to look at how easy it is to compute Nash equilibria. And to their delight, they found that this is a very difficult problem. And so computer scientists, theoretical computer scientists, especially the algorithms and complexity theory people, they love to work with the difficult problems, right? Because they want to show that a problem is NP hard, right, or NP complete, right? So there's a whole lot of complexity theory, framework around very difficult problems. So they started looking at what is the complexity of computing an Nash equilibrium. And so they came up with new complexity classes. There is a complexity class called PPAD complete. So they actually showed that the problem of computing the mixed strategy Nash equilibrium of a strategic form game belongs to this class of highly complex problems. So this is how the appetite of computer scientists and algorithm designers was vetted by the notion of the Nash equilibrium. And then what happens is that when data now becomes available, and that is the trend these days. Now people are trying to design applications and systems which will use this data in order to in order to increase your revenues in your business. So what I'm referring to here are all the e-commerce and the e-business kind of companies who came up in the late 90s and early 2000s and so on. So all of these companies started building recommendation systems from the data. And disciplines like data mining became extremely popular. So then, when all of these applications were getting developed, and then machine learning also started becoming popular, and so on, the question arose: what will happen to all of these applications? What will happen to all these recommendations when the information that is required for all these recommendations is held by strategic agents who may not be willing to give you the truthful information, right? So to give you an example, take the case of internet advertising, right? So in the case of internet advertising, If you consider a very simple example where you have a keyword search. So if you go to any portal or any search engine and then you do a keyword search, then what would happen is that you will get a number of organic results on the left side of the page that could run into lakhs and millions. And on the right side, you have these sponsored slots where companies which have got anything to do with this keyword, for example, if the keyword is camera, right? Companies which wants to sell cameras. If the keyword is Christmas, the companies which would like to sell Christmas gifts and so on, all of them, their advertisements can be found on the right side. And then what would happen is that if somebody clicks on any one of those slots, any one of those links, then the company corresponding to which that click has been made will end up paying a certain amount of money to the search engine. And this is how search engine companies make a huge amount of their revenue. In fact, a major fraction of the revenue comes from all these internet advertising, which happens because of auctions and so on. Now, the question comes, how do we design auctions so that you can maximize the revenue of the search engine? So, this is a problem which involves data science, machine learning, and also game theory. Now, how is data science involved here? Because you would like to look at the data about various advertisers in order to slot them in those positions that you have here. Because naturally, a person would like to do a click on the very first advertisement rather than the 10th advertisement or so. So the relative positions that you are going to give to the advertisers will pretty much depend on the historical information about how popular those companies are and so on. So there is data science involved there. Secondly, there is machine learning involved there, because what you want to do is you want to learn the click probabilities. Now, what are click probabilities? So, click probability is the probability with which a typical user will click the advertisement belonging to a certain company. So, this is called a click probability. So, using the enormous amount of data that you have collected over a long period of time, you would like to learn the click probability. So, there is a machine learning problem there. Now, all the advertisers are rational and intelligent people. Now, they are supposed to do a bid in order to participate in the auction. What is this auction? So, what the search engine will do is for getting a slot on the right side, so they have each company will have to bid a certain amount of money, right? How much of money does a company want to bid? Will pretty much depend on so many factors belonging to the company, which are all private information of the company. Now, what the search engine would like to do is to get as high a bid as possible, whereas the advertisers would like to bid as low as possible. So now game theory comes into picture directly here. How do you induce a game among the advertisers so that they bid as high as possible, so that the revenue of the search engine will be maximized? So there is a game theory problem there. The design of the auction that determines what slots the different advertisers will get and how much of payment will be done by the advertisers when a user clicks on those links is done using pure game theory. In fact, it's called mechanism design. So, using mechanism design, they came up with what is called the generalized second prize auction, and there is the Vickrey auction. There is a wide variety of auction mechanisms. So, you can see that there is data science, there is machine learning, there is game theory. All of them are involved in this internet advertising problem here. So, you can see that if you now want to get an extremely rigorous solution to some of the problems in modern applications like internet advertising, you see that you have to have machine learning and also game theory capabilities. right? So you can see that this convergence of game theory and computer science has also led to how game theory and machine learning can be combined in order to design the best possible algorithms in the presence of rational and intelligent and strategic agents. I hope that answers your question. It was a very long answer to a very relevant question. Yeah.
So, one of the questions that I had was, at one end, you have a search engine, which is actually using game theory to maximize the revenue of the advertiser, right? Imagine I am an advertiser, and
No, search engine is trying to maximize its own revenue.
yeah, I'm just saying it's maximize its own revenue. Sorry, maximize its own revenue. I get it. So imagine if I were an advertiser and I'm putting billions of dollars into advertising, right? And today, digital marketing itself globally has become probably 50% of spends of most companies. And I am a company spending couple of millions or billions of dollars on advertising. uh, how do I really reverse engineer game theory for my decision making, right? So because I want to bid the lowest, right? So which means that I need to have all the data, right? And I need to apply the game theory from my point of view, which is the advertiser's point of view, to say I have spent and bid so much of on so much of words. These are the results that I'm getting. And would there be a model for advertisers to apply game theory to their bids to optimize their budgets?
Absolutely. So this is called the bid optimization problem. So which is a problem which has been studied. There are hundreds of papers written on this bid optimization problem. But one way in which game can sometimes simplify the decision making for everybody is through what are called as incentive compatible auctions. To give you an example, this will require about 2 to 3 minutes to spend on this. The so-called Vickrey auction. So William Vickrey got the Nobel Prize in 1996 for a beautiful twist he gave to auction mechanisms. His auction mechanism is called the second prize auction. Now it goes like this. Suppose there is a single indivisible item. Suppose there is a bicycle for which there are three bidders. Fine. Call the bidders as A, B, and C. Now, these three players will place the bids, and then whoever bids the highest is usually selected as the winner. Fine. So, suppose A has bid, let's say, 1,000 rupees, B has bid 800 rupees, and C has bid 600 rupees. Fine. So naturally, A will win the auction and will pay 1,000 rupees. This is called the first prize auction. Now it turns out that first prize auction doesn't have this property called incentive compatibility. That is, the bidders will not bid their true valuations. What they will do is they will bid something lower than their true valuations because they want to get some utility out of it, right? So for example, uh, the bidder A, the true valuation for the bidder A may be 1,500 rupees. He is willing to pay up to 1,500 rupees, but he will not bid 1,500, he will bid 1,000 rupees. Fine. So similar is the case with B and C. Now let us say the valuation of A is 1,000, the valuation of B is 800, and the valuation of C is 600. That is, this is in some sense their willingness to buy. Their willingness to buy. Now the question is, can you extract this willingness to buy information from these bidders in a truthful way? Fine. So Vikri said that it is possible. What he did was to simply twist the first prize auction by saying whoever bids the highest will be the winner. However, the winner will not pay whatever he or she has bid, will pay the second highest bid. So now everybody knows that they have to bid high enough so that they will win. Because if you want to win, you have to bid very high. However, right, you know that when you win, you are not paying whatever you have bid. You are paying something less than what you have bid. So your bid will be very aggressive. Fine. How much aggressive will it be? So basically, he said the aggression will be the highest bid minus the second highest bid. Fine. You would be willing to pay an amount, an additional amount of the difference between the highest bid and the second highest bid. Fine. And using pure game theory, William Vickrey was able to show that this particular auction satisfies a property called incentive compatibility. In fact, it satisfies a very strong property called dominant strategy incentive compatibility. What it means is that your best response bid in the second prize auction will be to bid your true valuation, right, regardless of what the other players are going to bid. You don't have to worry about the bids of the other people. All that you have to do is to bid your own true valuation. This is the principle of satyameva jayate, right? And William Vickrey basically showed that this property is satisfied by the second prize auction. If you are so That is the ultimate in game theory. If you are able to design such auctions, then neither the search engine, right, nor the advertisers have to worry about anything. Advertisers have to just bid whatever their true valuation is, right? And if the search engine has to bid in some other context, the search engine has to bid whatever its true valuation is, right? Okay. But real world is very different. So people are not incentive compatible, but game theory gives you all the building blocks which are necessary to design auctions which will have some very desirable properties, right? So coming back to your question, right? So in a game where the search engine is a player and the advertisers are also a players, then the advertisers, knowing the mechanism, they should know they should know what mechanism is being adopted by the search engine. Is it first price auction, or is it second price auction, or whatever? So knowing the mechanism that the search engine is going to employ, they can formulate and solve a bid optimization problem, which will actually give the optimal bids that they should be placing in any given auction.
That's a brilliant answer, Professor. I think the fact that you're pretty much reversing uh, you know, the approach, I think was brilliant. And I think the other thing that I saw really was somebody like Google, really hired economist as a part of their, the first employee, or the early employees, I would call. And I think that's something that was very interesting, because they really believed in the game theory and the auction model, right? Vignesh, you had a few things to say about that.
Yeah, so since you were talking about algorithmic game theory and the availability of information to basically support the advertising model on which a lot of Google's revenue is built today, we were discussing this some time back, and I we had a short sidebar where we were talking about how a large swath of Google's revenue and success today can be pinned down directly to one man, and his name is Hal Varian. And I so I just want to know, what is the impact that, if you look at, I mean, if I had to phrase it differently, a lot of great technology companies look for great founding engineers, right? So what are the qualities of a great founding economist, if you might even have one in a company or in a startup? Because I think that's the role that Hal Varian played for Google.
Yes, so talking about Hall Varian, I would like to say that uh, again, he is one of my heroes, and for the wonderful book that he has written on intermediate microeconomics. I must tell you that there are 4 or 5 books which have inspired me in game theory. I personally learned game theory through a book written by Mascolel, Winston, and Green. It is called, Microeconomic Theory. It's a 1,000-page book, excellent book, and I learned my game theory and mechanism design through that book. And around the same time, reading Mascolal's book, it needs a lot of math, and it's actually you have to really, concentrate to understand what is going on there. So I wanted to get a I wanted to get conceptual clarity about microeconomics concepts. So that is when I was recommended this book, Intermediate Microeconomics by Hall Varian. And the beautiful way in which he has structured the book, in fact, inspired me later on to structure my book also in a somewhat similar form. He has got these little chapters, and every chapter has a fantastic takeaway. And he has very illustrative examples, doesn't get into too much of math and so on. I think what is great about Hall Varian is the conceptual clarity. I think it was a master stroke to get Hall Varian into their ranks, and he made all the important first moves in designing the internet advertising strategy for Google in those days. Um, it is very important that companies, you know, get the help of very rigorous computer scientists or mathematicians and so on. And all the leading companies have been doing that, whether it is Google or Microsoft Research or Facebook or Amazon and so on. They have actually hired many Turing Award winners, leading economists, and people with stellar research records. Because behind any algorithm that works very well, so there is there is also pure theory that is associated, which should ensure that the algorithm itself will work under all conditions. So there is mathematical rigor required if you want to design robust algorithms. And I think this is something which has driven all the leading companies to take the help of whether leading economists or leading computer scientists into their ranks. And some of these companies have the best talents. And you know that the people who won the deep learning Turing Prize, right? You can see the kind of jobs they are holding in all the leading companies, right? So I think I would say that Google made the best move possible in getting people like Halvarian. Halvarian is only one example, but there are so many other people who also got hired by all the leading companies during those times. I think early 2000s was a golden age for that. So 2000 to 2006 or so was the golden age for that. And it was purely accidental that I was also working in that area during those times, right? And thanks to my excellent PhD students.
So, Professor, one of when you were researching for this episode, we were listening to a talk that you had given about game theory and mechanism design and computer science. And one statement that you said really stood out to me that when I was listening to when I was listening to that conversation, to that lecture, and it was that it's the following: incentives are everything. So you said that if you want to achieve anything, you got to have relevant incentives that are mapped against it for people to go ahead and do what you want them to do. So a question that I have is, what are some of the principles that lie at the foundation of a good incentive?
Okay, I'll just give you the example of Vickrey auction, right? So in Vickrey auction, the incentive that is being given to the winning player is that the winning player has to pay not 1,000 rupees but 800 rupees. So there is an incentive of 200 rupees that is given. Now you consider the reverse auction, the procurement auction. Now in the procurement auction, there is a buyer and there are suppliers or sellers. And now there is a certain item that you are trying to buy. So let us say that there are three possible suppliers. First supplier says, "I will give it to you at 1,000 rupees." The second one will say, "I will give it to you at 800 rupees," and the third one will say, "I will give it to you at 600 rupees." I'm just reversing the problem here. And now your winner will be the supplier who has quoted 600 rupees because now you're buying, you're trying to minimize your cost. Now, here your aim is to sort of induce honest behavior from the suppliers by making the suppliers bid their true costs, right? So now the player C who has bid 600, right, has bid very low because he knows that 600 is his cost, and then if he bids very low, the probability of his winning is very high, and when he wins, right, he's not getting just 600 rupees, but he's getting 800 rupees. He's going to get the second lowest bid. So you're giving an incentive of 200 rupees to the player, right? So that way you can see that auctions, or in general, when you do mechanism design, it is all about incentives. It is all about incentives. And the most important property for an auction, as I told you, is incentive compatibility. Fine. That is, what are the incentives that you should be giving to the various players in the game so that you are able to induce honest behavior from all the players. That is the real meaning of incentive compatibility. And now you can take any problem. For example, let us say you are a product company, and then there is a sales force, and there is a sales manager. So that you have the sales executives, sales managers, and then the actual sales professionals. There is an entire sales network for you. Now the question is, what kind of incentives should you be giving to all your sales force, all your sales personnel, so that your product sales are maximized, right? It's actually a game theory problem. It's actually a game theory problem. So there, what you have to do is you have to look at what kind of incentives you should be giving to the sales executives, to the sales personnel at the lower levels, and so on, so that your sales are getting maximized. You can actually now um, uh, capture this or model this as a game where all of these are players. And now, if you are able to induce all of them to reveal to you their true efforts, then in recognition of these true efforts, you will be able to pay them the kind of amounts that they would deserve. This is basically you're designing the incentives which are proportional to the efforts that are put in by the players, and also the impact that it is making on the overall sales of the product and so on. So you can see that incentive design itself can be formulated in any given problem by coming up with an appropriate game model, and then looking at how a mechanism can be designed so that these incentives are obtained as a byproduct of that mechanism.
I would just also sort of add that, since we've brought the words out, game theory and mechanism design, it will be a little more helpful if you could just give a formal definition for our listeners as well as to what is game theory and what is mechanism design and what is the relationship between the two.
Two. Okay. So game theory and mechanism design are two phrases that you will use to describe analysis and design. Game theory is analysis of games. Mechanism design is design of games. One is analysis, another is design. Mechanism design also can be called as reverse engineering of games. And the best example with which I can illustrate both game theory and mechanism design is through the cake cutting example. All of you know about the cake cutting example. So there is a cake. Uh, there is a mother. She has two kids. One is a boy, another is a girl, and both are fighting over the cake. Now the mother has to distribute the cake equally between the two players, right? So what does the mother do? Mother may take the best knife in the world and then slice the cake into exactly two equal portions, right? and then place these equal portions in front of the two kids, or give one each to the kid. Then each kid will go away with the feeling that what he or she got is the smaller of the two slices, howsoever equal those two slices may look like. Fine. Now, how do you solve this problem? This problem is may look very innocuous, but when you look at how Karnataka and Tamil Nadu are fighting over the Kaveri waters, so the Kaveri waters is the cake, and SR Bommai is one of the kids, and Stalin is the other kid, and Narendra Modi is the mother. So you can map this problem to this problem right away, right? It's actually a very difficult problem to solve. Now, how does mechanism design and game theory solve this problem? The mother induces a game. The mother induces a game on the two kids. And then, in an equilibrium of that game, what gets implemented is a desirable solution for the game. Okay, what is the game that is induced here? The mother says, I have the knife with me. I will give it to kid A. Now, kid A will have to slice it into two portions. And then kid B will get the chance to pick up one of those two slices. Right? So now here is a situation where you have two rational and intelligent players, the two kids. Each one wants to get the lion's share of the cake. Now, the first kid who gets the knife knows that the second kid is going to pick up the larger of the two slices. So, we'll cut the cake with so much precision that there will be two equal portions only, right? And then now there are two slices there. Now, what does the second kid do? The second kid will look at both these slices and will pick up what she thinks is the larger of the two slices. Fine. So the first kid is very happy. The second kid is very happy. The mother is happy. Stalin is happy. Bombay is happy. And Narendra Modi is also happy. Right? So now there is both game and mechanism design here. What is the mechanism design? The protocol, right, of cutting the cake and so on is the mechanism. When a mechanism is implemented, it induces a game among the players. So what is the game that is induced? Because now kid 1, right, has a strategy space. What is the strategy space? There is a cake that has to be cut into two portions, right? So can I cut it as 1/3, 2/3, or 1/4, 3/4, or half and half? This is the strategy space, right? And chooses the strategy half half. Fine. And then the other kid also has a strategy space. There are two slices, has to pick up one of these two slices, right? So you can see that there is a game that is being played out, and that has been induced by a protocol, and that protocol is mechanism. So now you see that there is an equilibrium for this game. And what is the equilibrium? In the equilibrium of the game, the first kid sort of cuts the cake into exactly two equal slices in the equilibrium, and then the second kid will pick up what he or she thinks is the larger of the two slices. So that is the equilibrium of this game. Fine. But in the equilibrium of the game, you have actually implemented what is called as a social choice function. What is good for the society? You have implemented a function which is good for the society and which is good for all the players in this particular case, right? So that is the difference between game theory and mechanism design. Both of them go well with each other, right? And one is completely concerned with equilibrium analysis, and the other is concerned with how, right, you can induce a game in which, in the equilibrium of the game, something very desirable will happen. Now, equilibrium has many, many notions, right? So, the most famous notion, as all of us know, is Nash equilibrium. But there are other notions called dominant strategy equilibria. There you have strong, weak, very weak dominant strategy equilibria. You also have what are called mixed strategy Nash equilibria. You have got what are called correlated equilibria. And you also have what are called as max min values and min max values. So these are all different solution concepts in the analysis of games. So given a game theory will tell you how to look for all these solution concepts, and we'll look at the existence of these equilibria. We'll also look at the computation of these equilibria and so on.
That's a brilliant, explanation of game theory and mechanism design. It can't be more simple than what you explained so beautifully, Professor.
Actually, in order to explain how, a game can be defined, I use a very simple example. This is the first example that I usually use in my class. So this is the example of IISc versus MG Road example. So there are two students, call them as A and B. They're very good friends, and if they're together, then there is some utility that they get out of their being together. And they have two they have two strategies in front of them. One is they choose either IISc or they choose MG Road. IISc means they will go to the library, and like very sincere students, they will be studying in the library and so. In MG Road, people, you know what people do, right? MG Road is Mahatma Gandhi Road, and everything that happens on MG Road is anti Mahatma Gandhi, as you know. So, so they have only two strategies to play with. Now, the question is that if both of them are in IISc, they get a utility of 10, comma 10, 10 units. 10 units of utility player A gets, student B also gets. Whereas if one of them is in IISc and the other is in MG Road, they will get 0, comma 0 because they are not together. If both of them are in MG Road, if both of them are in MG Road, then they will get 1, comma 1, right? Which is much less than 10, comma 10. Fine. So now, what are the rules of the game? So in game theory, this matrix is there, right? This matrix which will tell you the numbers of the utilities that you will get in different strategy profiles, right? This matrix is known to both the players. Not only that, both the players know that both the players know the matrix. Not only that, both the players know that both the players know that both the players know the matrix. So it is common knowledge. The matrix is common knowledge. But they are supposed to make simultaneous moves. They're supposed to decide whether they want to be in, whether each one wants to be in IISc or MG Road simultaneously. Student A does not know what student B has decided. Student B does not know what student A has decided. This is called a simultaneous move strategic form game. Now the question is, what is an equilibrium in this game? Right? Now, the intuitive part here is that game theory rightly predicts that IISc, IISc is an equilibrium, right? Because both of them will get 10, 10. It also says that IISc, MG Road is not an equilibrium. It also tells you that MG Road, MG Road is also an equilibrium, right? They are getting a utility, but it is less than the utility that they are going to get. So you can see in different equilibria they can get different utilities. But what is counterintuitive and what game theory brilliantly reveals is that there is another equilibrium here. That is a mixed strategy Nash equilibrium. And the mixed strategy Nash equilibrium here is the following. With probability 10 by 11, you are in MG Road, and with probability 1 by 11, you are in IISc. So if both the players follow this strategy profile, player A is in IISc with probability 1 by 11 with MG Road with probability 10 by 11. Player B also is in IISc with probability 1 by 11 and in MG Road with probability 10 by 11. Then also you can show that there is an equilibrium. And I tell the students, this is the reason why the students are mostly in MG Road and not in IISc. This is predicted beautifully by game theory using the notion of a mixed strategy Nash equilibrium. So in order to understand this, I will have to get into some math, which I don't want to now, right? But you can see how, what happens as the outcome of the interesting dynamics among rational and intelligent agents is beautifully explained by game theory. I have used these two words, rational and intelligent, too many times. I must tell you what these two actually mean. Rationality means that every player has a certain utility function. There is a certain utility that you derive by playing a certain strategy. Fine. So, rationality means that each player will choose a strategy such that it will maximize the utility function. More generally, it should maximize an expected value of that utility function in a probabilistic sense. This is called rationality. Whereas intelligence basically means that every player knows how to compute the best response. And a player's best response is a strategy which will maximize his or her utility when the other players are playing their best response strategies. And the best response strategies of the other players are best responses against the best responses of the players. You can see there's a beautiful recursion there. And game theory basically, helps you to break this recursion with the notion of an equilibrium. So you define this equilibrium, right, by making just the assumption of rationality and intelligence. Now, rationality does not mean that you are always selfish. Rationality only means that you are maximizing your utility function. This utility function, right, if it is in your self interest, then rationality means selfishness. Whereas if the utility function, right, captures the fact that you want every player to be happy in the game, then you can see that such a game represents altruistic behavior. You can actually represent altruism also using game theory. So rationality and intelligence have to be viewed in that very general light, which will enable you to model all kinds of human behaviors and dynamics among human beings, right, as a mathematical abstraction.
Uh, Professor, I have one question around this big thing that's happening around us, which is social media, right? And there is a lot of information diffusion and online discussion forums where a lot of uh, you know uh, opinions and data is available, and information diffusion is one great example of virality that that can hit the overall social media as a network. How do you really how can game theory be used to ensure that it can be optimized for common good and for probably what you call as reducing fake news and ability to therefore build value for the user?
Yes, I think this is one problem on which we did some work. Um, this is the information diffusion problem. So suppose you have a social network with a very large number of nodes, millions of nodes, and now information diffusion happens. For example, rumors can spread very fast, and as you said, viral behavior can be exhibited by the social network, and so on. So now there is a problem called as the influence maximization problem. That is, if there is a positive news and you want to spread it, very fast in the network, right? Then how do you design your information diffusion process? Is a very important question. So there is what is called as the influential nodes problem. So if you are given a social network with millions of nodes, it turns out that there are a small number of nodes, uh, the so-called influential nodes, which are actually playing a very important role in the information diffusion. These are the well-connected nodes. These are the well-connected nodes. Game theory can be used to discover the most influential nodes in a social network. Now, suppose you want to find who are the 100 most influential nodes. So what happens is you can actually use some plain graph theory. You can use some graph theory, construct a graph of the social network, and then you can find out which are the most connected nodes, and declare the most connected nodes as the most influential nodes. But that is not the end of the story, because what happens is the most connected node may be in a very small cluster. Fine. If it's in a very small cluster but very well connected, the news will spread only to that cluster. So you have to look at inter-cluster connections also. So we actually hit upon this idea that the influence of a node in a social network in terms of information diffusion can be determined using a cooperative game theory concept called the Shapley value. So Lloyd Shapley, very celebrated game theorist, Shapley and John Nash were PhD students with the same advisor, Professor Alan Tucker, in the Princeton University, and both were doing PhD at the same time. So Nash was working on non-cooperative game theory, and Shapley was working on cooperative game theory. And you would have known the famous Gale-Shapley algorithm, which is a matchmaking algorithm. So the so-called stable marriage problem, matchmaking, matching students to colleges, matching doctors to hospitals, matching kidney donors to kidney recipients. So these famous matching problem. So Gale-Shapley algorithm is a very famous algorithm, which is supposed to be the most fundamental contribution there. Shapley has done wonderful things. He has contributed to non-cooperative game theory also, and he was the originator of what are called stochastic games, potential games, and so on. So there is what is called Shapley value. What the Shapley value says is that if you have a cooperative game where the people are trying to cooperate with each other, and they're also trying to bargain among themselves, and they engage themselves in what are called effective negotiations, then if there is a certain amount of surplus, right, that has to be shared among the players, what is the best way in which that can be shared among the players is a central issue in cooperative game theory. So for example, if there is a if there is 1,000 rupees available and there are five players who are vying for that, right, and how much should each player get based on the contributions that they have made. So Shapley came up with a solution concept based on some axioms, very simple axioms. He looked at what are all the desirable properties that should be satisfied by any such surplus sharing arrangements. John Nash solved this problem completely for the two-player game. It's called the Nash bargaining solution. So if there are two players who are trying to share a certain surplus, then what is the best way in which they can share the surplus so that both of them are happy? That problem was solved completely by John Nash. So Shapley was looking at the problem in the context of multiplayer games. So in the context of cooperative games, he defined the Shapley value as a unique solution concept, which will tell you what fraction of the surplus should go to each player based on the contribution that each player is making to the overall game, right? So we hit upon this idea that the information diffusion that happens in a social network can be actually modeled as a cooperative game, because the information diffusion has to happen. Two nodes have to come together, or multiple nodes will have to be involved when the information diffuses. So by defining the cooperative game appropriately, then we computed the Shapley value. And the Shapley value basically gives the marginal contribution. The intuitive meaning of Shapley value is, if there are three players, right, then A, B, and C, what is the marginal contribution that A is making to B and C, right, in any coalition? What's the marginal contribution that B is making to the game? What is the marginal contribution that C is making the game? So you can compute the marginal contributions of each one of these nodes to information diffusion game. And all that you have to do is to pick up, if you're interested in the 100 most influential nodes, you have to pick up the 100 nodes having the highest Shapley values and then do a little more work. And you have solved the problem. Once you are able to get the most influential nodes, right, the rest of it can be managed. Fine. It can be either influence maximization. So influence maximization means you give a t-shirt to each one of these 100 players free of cost and tell them, why don't you advertise about my t-shirt brand? That is the influence maximization problem. There is also an influence limitation problem. That is, if a rumor is spreading very fast, right, and you want to contain the rumor, fine, then also you catch hold of these influential people. And so what they do is, there's a negative campaign which is getting diffused in the network. Now these people start a positive campaign, right? So these positive campaigns can be, sort of triggered at the influential nodes. Whether you want to trigger it in one phase or two phase or three phases and so on is another research question on which also we worked. So whether it is information diffusion or influence maximization or influence limitation, right? Game theory has certain toolkits, solution concepts, which can be leveraged to solve this problem.
So, Professor, I think one thing that I'm actually seeing is that if you take a particular silo of knowledge and you add game theory into it, you get a cornucopia of excitement that actually comes out of it. You take computer science plus game theory, you get algorithmic game theory, right? You take evolutionary biology plus game theory, you get the cooperative Robert Axelrod sort of evolution of cooperation sort of a situation. So I want to know what happens when you take something like the human mind. So, for example, if you 2002, the Nobel Prize was won by Kahneman and Tversky, who were not really economists; they were actually cognitive scientists, right? And what happens when you take those you take a behavioral a behavioral economics sort of a stream, and you add game theory into that? What does that really tell about how humans think and how humans behave and how humans make choices?
Yes. So you can see that behavioral economics has, very close connections to game theory. So because game theory is all about how the human dynamics play out, and the hardest problem in game theory is to define the game itself. When you have to define the game, you have to first of all understand who are the players of this game. For example, when we talked about the procurement auction, there is a buyer and there are suppliers. We have to decide whether buyer is also a part of the game, or buyer is outside the game and only suppliers are participating in the game. In the cake cutting example, we have to decide whether the mother is also a game player or only the two kids are playing the game. So the first thing is to identify who are playing the game. Second important task is, what are the strategies available to each one of the players, right? Is the strategy space same or different? Third one is utility functions. How do you define the utility of a player? Utility of a player is basically, if player 1 is playing strategy 1, player 2 is playing strategy 2, player n is playing strategy n. So that vector of strategies being played by the n players is called a strategy profile. So in each and every strategy profile, right, you have to identify what is the utility. That if player 1 plays strategy 1, player n plays strategy n, what is the utility that is going to accrue to each of the players is what you are supposed to decide with the utility functions. Now, in behavioral economics, you are basically looking at how one person will respond to the moves made by the other person or the group behavior of a coalition of players and so on. So you have to find a way of codifying that behavior in the form of utility functions, having defined a strategy space. If you are able to do that, there is a close connection established between behavioral economics and game theory. I would go to the extent of saying that game theory gives you a mathematical abstraction to get an initial analysis of behavioral economics. But game theory may not help you to capture each and every aspect of behavioral economics. And that is when you have to get into, field experiments. You have to get into, agent-based simulations in order to, make more sense out of the behavioral dynamics that happens among the players.
Sorry, Professor. Sorry for the interruption, but is that juncture because game theory is based on the premise that the people playing in the game are intelligent and rational, as you say, whereas the opposing belief is what drives behavioral economics, that people are irrational and people are not as intelligent as they seem, and they are bound to make mistakes.
Absolutely. So it is not true that game theory does not model situations where people are irrational. Um, well, rationality and intelligence are two fundamental assumptions which are made in game theory. However, when you define the solution concepts in game theory, so there are worst case solution concepts. What are these worst case solution concepts? An example is what is called max min value. Max min value of a player is in some sense the minimum utility that is guaranteed the to the player when all the other players gang up against him and play the worst possible strategy profile against this player. That's called the max min value, minimum guaranteed payoff that you can get under the very worst case. Now you can see, you are now assuming that the other players may not be rational. They can do anything, whatever the other players do. What is the minimum guaranteed payoff that you can get is the max min value. Similarly, there is also what is called a min max value, which proceeds on the same lines by assuming worst case behavior from the rest of the players. Fine. So you can see that game theory is founded on principles of rationality and intelligence in order to develop all the central notions of game theory. However, you also have solution concepts which take into account irrational behavior of the rest of the players. That is point number one. Point number two is behavioral economists essentially fundamentally question the assumptions of rationality and intelligence, right? But behavioral economists also require a certain baseline model to get a grounding of the problem first. Having got the grounding of the problem, then they can actually relax assumptions of rationality and intelligence and then derive, right, all the other interesting behavior that can be exhibited, right? So in either case, game theory happens to be a very valuable tool that can be used by behavioral economists also.
So, Professor, I have this interesting, question that I've been asking myself. There are businesses which have a lot of data, and they are able to apply, various game theory models to optimize and to maximize their revenue, right? So that's the typical model that every business has got, whether it's on the procurement side, whether it's on the revenue maximization side. But imagine the most exploited is this individual human being, right? If I'm a player, and I want to maximize my utility function, right? And I want to beat the business in their games. Okay, how do I do it given the fact that I don't capture data, I don't do machine learning? Therefore this conflict between intuition and optimization, okay, is something that I've been thinking about. And how do you see that happening in the future?
So I think this is where policy making comes into picture. Policies are very important. Whoever is responsible for making these policies has to apply their mind and put in place policies by which everybody in the system is able to maximize their utilities. Now, there are two philosophies. One is the egalitarian philosophy, another is a utilitarian philosophy. Egalitarian philosophy is the philosophy of, in some sense, equal share for everybody, in some sense, fairness. Whereas utilitarian principle says that you maximize the sum of the utilities of all the players who are involved. And there is usually a conflict between these two. There is usually a conflict between these two. Egalitarian solutions are not necessarily utilitarian, and utilitarian solutions are not necessarily egalitarian. Now, policy makers, for example, you were talking about businesses trying to maximize their revenue, and individuals are helpless against these strategies and so on. But there is also an agency called the Central Design Authority or the government, which is supposed to put in place certain policies so that this can be completely, prevented. Fine. So that is where I think what they will have to do is to look at how one can achieve a very nice trade-off between egalitarianism and utilitarianism. Such solutions are possible, and game theory gives lots of pointers to such solutions. To give you a very simple example, I was talking about the Nash bargaining solution. Now, if there is a surplus that has to be shared by two players, right? Now, one approach is egalitarian. Another is utilitarian, fine. But then what is good for the players, right? May not be egalitarian, may not be pure egalitarianism, may not be pure utilitarianism. So, what you do is that you define a solution which is, in some sense, what is called lambda egalitarian and lambda utilitarian. That is, these are approximately egalitarian, approximately utilitarian, because you're trying to achieve a trade off. And this approximateness you're capturing using a factor called lambda. Fine. John Nash brilliantly showed that there is one meeting point for lambda egalitarian and lambda utilitarian solutions. Showed that there exists a lambda such that lambda egalitarian solution is the same as the lambda utilitarian solution, and that precisely happens to be the Nash bargaining solution. So I think I'm giving a very devious answer to your question. I'm only saying that this kind of situations can be somewhat taken care of by designing very sound policies, and these policies should be based on principles like egalitarianism, utilitarianism, and so on. And the policy makers should apply their mind in order to put in place certain protocols by which this kind of situations can be avoided. I know that I'm not answering your question completely. I'm only saying that game theory gives you certain tools with which you can approach the problem.
Okay. We now head into a rapid fire sort of a situation that we have prepared for you, Professor. So we'll ask you a question. You can give an answer as short or as long as you like, based on how you feel about the question. So, my first question to you is, Professor, what are some of the books that have influenced you the most over the course of your life and career?
Okay, so the 4 or 5 books which have influenced me the most, I will tell you: Maskell, Winston and Green, Microeconomic Theory; Hallvarian, Intermediate Microeconomics; Roger Myerson, who wrote this book on game theory; and finally, the book on auctions by Vijay Krishna. So these are the 4 books which have influenced me the most in the recent times. I would say in the last 20 years.
Professor, my question to you is, if you were to advise a 18-year-old in college on how he should look at his future skills and what should he be building for the future, what are the 3 or 4 top things that the 18-year-old should focus and build their skills on?
I think the first one I would suggest is mathematical rigor and no compromise on the mathematical content in whatever they're studying. That's number one, because mathematics is behind almost everything these days, and sound mathematics will give you sound solutions. That is number one. Number two, problem solving. Don't focus on all the textbook type of things. uh, don't read just the theory part and not solve the problems. Solve the problems, try to solve the problems first and then study the theory, right? So problem solving is very important. The third thing that I would say is that instead of watching the TV and looking at the mobile phone, read a non-technical book, read some nice novels, and for example, read Wodehouse. That will go a long way in elevating the quality of your life. That's the third thing I would like to advise them. And the fourth thing that I would like to tell them is that you know there is a place for non-technical things in life, and they should also try to do many non-technical things and try to implement things rather than imagining how to do things. They should actually try to implement things, even if it is very very small things. And the best way to do that in the house itself. You can start that in the home itself. So I have personally found that I get a lot of delight, lot of satisfaction by cooking in the house, which I may not do every day, but I think this is a beautiful diversion that one can have. And well, I think you wanted only 3 or 4 things.
So, Professor, my next question is, if you could invite 4 guests for a dream dinner, who would they be and why?
It's a very difficult question. So, dream dinner. Certainly, my father, my mother, Uh, okay, my professor, and of course my wife. So these are the four people that I love most. This is not a very fair question.
uh, Professor, my next question to you is, what does the word successful mean to you?
The word successful, sort of means that you should be able to make a difference somewhere. Um, I think last 1.5 to 2 years, there is something that I'm trying to do, right? And in the next 3 years, what I do there will either become a blockbuster hit or it will be a miserable failure. But I'll be happy either way. I'll be happy either way. I'm telling you what I'm doing. I'm just trying to look at Indian agriculture, and I'm trying to see whether something can be done there. Right? Obviously, game theory is a tool that I'm familiar with. So game theory is like a hammer for me. I'm looking for nails, right? And I'm also reasonably familiar with AI ML techniques. In fact, last semester I offered a course on AI for social good. Now, I found that I should try out whatever little I know on Indian agriculture. The reason for that is that when I was reading some papers, it turns out that 85% of farmers in India are smallholder farmers or marginal farmers. These are farmers, who hold less than 5 acres of land, and for a variety of reasons, the kind of I think the greatest risk in India is faced by the farmers. There is risk because of nature. There is risk because of government. There is risk because of middlemen. There is risk because of market fluctuations and so on. So I'm trying to work on some problems which will possibly help the farmers. And this is one area where I want to inspire my students and also work with startups and develop 2 or 3 mobile apps for the farmers, which will help them in whatever they do. I think one mobile app will be for estimating the price of whatever they are growing right now reasonably accurately. The second mobile app is to recommend a portfolio of crops for the next 1 year based on a variety of conditions. Fine. And taking into account even cultural factors. See, when I go to the farmer and then tell him, right, I'm trying to develop some of these things, they will say, sir, you don't know anything, right? We know for centuries we have been doing this. We know what to do and so on. It's not very easy to convince. So all the algorithms that I develop, I want them to be explainable and explainable in a language that will be understood by the farmers. So that's the second mobile app. The third mobile app I'm trying to do is using cooperative game theory, farmer collectives. In fact, right now in India, there are more than 6,000 plus so-called farmer producer organizations. FPOs, they are called. These are farmer collectives. These are farmer cooperatives, right? And the super success of Amul, for example, right? That is very well known, very well documented, right? And I know that there are many people who have tried to replicate the Amul model in the farming sector, and they have not been very successful, right? For whatever it is worth, I really want to choose at least one aspect of agriculture and see whether the Amul model can be repeated there using some principles of cooperative game theory. So these are the three things that I'm trying to do over the next 3 years. As I said, uh, you know, whatever little I'm able to do, if it can create even an epsilon impact I would consider that as a smashing success. Because I know that even epsilon, when you multiply by the volumes of the farmers, it will be a huge number.
That's a great answer, Professor. My next question is, what's the best piece of advice anybody has ever given you?
Oh, okay. I think that's a very, very interesting question. Okay, I will tell you that. I was doing my third year BSc. I was doing my third year BSc, and my brother's marriage was taking place, and then my brother's future father-in-law, he asked. His name is Shri Anantrao. He asked me the question, "What are you going to do after BSc?" So I was studying in National College Gauri Bidnur. My vision for myself was, because I'm reasonably good in maths, I wanted to do MSc maths and then come back to the college as a lecturer in the college. That is what I precisely told him. Right? I want to do MSc maths in Central College, Bangalore, right? And then get a good percentage and then get a job as a lecturer in National College, Gauri Bidnur. And that is where I would like to teach my mathematics. He said, "Do you know that you can do your MSc, right, in Indian Institutes of Technology?" Then I told him I don't know what are IITs. He also told me, "Do you know that there is a BE program, 3 year BE program after your BSc in what is called Indian Institute of Science?" I said, "I do not know anything about IISc. Frankly, I did not know much about IISc, and this happened in my early third year BSc because I think the level of awareness was very low at that point of time, right?" He said, "My first son has done his BE in IISc after finishing his BSc, and after finishing BE, he is now working as a manager in BHEL. So why don't you try getting into a BE program in IISc?" So that's the first time I came to know about IISc. And I think they will say rest is history. They will say I applied to I applied to IISc, knowing about IISc just 3 months before applying to IISc, and I got a selection here. This was in 1979, and from 1979 I'm only in IISc. I was a student here. I'm a faculty member here. So I became a scientific. So I finished my PhD in '87. I became a scientific officer. Then I became a lecturer. I became an assistant professor, then an associate professor, then a full professor. Then I was chairman of the computer science department for 4 years. Then I was actually chairman of the entire division of EECS for 7 years. That's where I am, right? I think that was a turning point.
And my last question to you is, what is one thing that you believe in that others disagree with you?
This is others. My view of life is to be very positive about everything, and anybody and everybody makes mistakes, right? Just ignore the mistakes and then move on. This is something that I firmly believe in. I don't think anybody in this world agrees with me on this. Nobody agrees with me in this on this because they don't want to not punish, they don't want to not punish people who have done mistakes, and they think that is my greatest weakness.
Thank you for that answer, Professor. My final question to you is, if you could invite or if you would like to see another guest featured on ContraMinds, who would it be and why?
Please get Narendra Modi. If you can manage to get Narendra Modi on this, I think ContraMinds will be in a different plane altogether. So that would be very nice. But if you really ask me that question, then you should certainly get. I really love this person, Professor Vivek Borkar from IIT Bombay. So he's my role model, and he has shown to the entire world that India can actually produce brilliant individuals, and the kind of publications and the kind of training that he has given to his own students is something. He's like a role model for me, Professor Vivek Borkar from IIT Bombay. Very, very simple, humble, but absolutely brilliant, and scholar par excellence in mathematics. He's actually he was President's Gold Medal winner in IIT Bombay. Then he went to University of California, Berkeley, and did his PhD with Professor Praveen Varaya. And ever since, he has actually been India, and wonderful, wonderful person.
Thanks a lot, Professor. It was a fantastic conversation, and I'm not even, able to really look at the time and say, about 1.5 hours has passed with such interesting and deep topic as game theory. You have made it so easy and extremely lucid in terms of explanations, and I really thank you for your time, and it was fantastic talking to you.
Thank you very much. I should say that I also really enjoyed, the conversation. I see that it's already 7:45 or something like that. I think it has almost crossed 1 hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hours. So I thoroughly enjoyed, and some of the questions were absolutely, I think, enjoyable to me. Very nice interacting with both of you. Wonderful experience for me. Something that I will remember for a long, long time.
Thanks a lot, Professor. Thanks for listening to this episode. For selected links and detailed show notes, visit www.contraminds.com/blog. Follow ContraMinds on social media and let us know who you would like to see next on the podcast. If you're listening to ContraMinds on Apple Podcasts, do share your comments and give us a rating. We are keen to know what you're thinking. ContraMinds is also on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and stay up to date on all our releases. Thanks for listening and stay safe.